Welcome to Camo's Mirror, the podcast where we take a deep, reflective look at ourselves and the world around us. I'm your host, Camo, and today we have a truly special episode lined up for you. Before we dive in, I want to remind you that while we aim to provide educational and informational content, nothing in this podcast should be taken as personalized advice. Always consult with certified professionals for guidance specific to your situation. So with that said, let's get started. The title of today's topic is Embracing Vulnerability as a Strength. In a world that often equates vulnerability with weakness, we'll discover why opening up might be the bravest thing you can do. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Solomon, a subject matter expert in psychology and emotional intelligence. Solomon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Camo. It's great to be here, and I'm really excited to dive into this important topic with you.
Likewise. So let's start with a fundamental question. Why do you think vulnerability is often seen as a weakness in our society?
That's a great question, Camo. The perception of vulnerability as a weakness is deeply rooted in cultural and societal norms. From a young age, many of us are taught to be strong and hide our feelings, which can create the illusion that showing emotion is synonymous with being fragile or incapable. This mindset is reinforced by the media and even certain leadership models that glorify stoicism and emotional detachment as the ultimate signs of strength. However, what's often overlooked is that vulnerability is not about being weak, it's about being authentic. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we're actually demonstrating a deep level of courage. We're saying, I'm willing to show up as I am, even if that means facing potential judgment or rejection. This kind of emotional bravery is not only empowering for the individual, but also fosters deeper connections with others.
That's a powerful insight, Solomon. It sounds like vulnerability is closely tied to the concept of authenticity. How does embracing vulnerability help us build stronger relationships, both personally and professionally?
Absolutely, Camo. Vulnerability is the gateway to authentic relationships. When we're open about our feelings, fears, and insecurities, we create an environment of trust and empathy. This authenticity allows others to see us for who we truly are, not just the polished version we often present to the world. In a professional context, for instance, leaders who are willing to admit their mistakes or uncertainties can build stronger teams. According to research by Brené Brown, a leading expert on vulnerability, employees are more likely to respect and follow leaders who are open about their imperfections. This transparency encourages a culture of collaboration and innovation, where team members feel safe to share ideas without the fear of being judged. On a personal level, vulnerability strengthens relationships by deepening emotional intimacy. When you share your true self with someone, you invite them to do the same, creating a mutual bond that is much stronger than any surface-level interaction. This connection is essential for meaningful and lasting relationships, whether they're romantic, familial, or friendships.
Brené Brown's work is indeed influential. You mentioned earlier that vulnerability can sometimes be met with judgment or rejection. How can someone navigate these potential risks and still embrace vulnerability?
That's a critical point, Camo. The fear of judgment or rejection is often what holds people back from being vulnerable. However, it's important to remember that vulnerability is a choice, and with it comes a certain degree of risk. The key is to be discerning about when and with whom you choose to be vulnerable. Start by identifying safe spaces, relationships, or environments where you feel supported and valued. This might be with close friends, family, or even a therapist. By practicing vulnerability in these contexts, you can build confidence and resilience, which will make it easier to be vulnerable in more challenging situations. It's also essential to set boundaries. Vulnerability doesn't mean sharing everything with everyone. It's about being selective and intentional. Ask yourself, what do I hope to gain from sharing this part of myself? If the potential benefits, like deeper connection or personal growth, outweigh the risks, then it's worth considering. Lastly, it's crucial to develop self-compassion. Understand that not everyone will respond positively to your vulnerability, and that's okay. Their reaction is not a reflection of your worth. What's important is that you're being true to yourself and living authentically.
That's excellent advice, Solomon. It sounds like vulnerability is both a personal and strategic choice. Let's explore this further. How can embracing vulnerability impact our mental health? Can it lead to greater resilience and emotional well-being?
Certainly, Camo. Embracing vulnerability can have profound effects on mental health. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give ourselves permission to experience and process our emotions fully, rather than suppressing them. This emotional processing is crucial for mental health because it prevents the buildup of unaddressed feelings, which can lead to stress, anxiety, and even depression over time. Moreover, by facing our vulnerabilities head-on, we can develop greater emotional resilience. Resilience isn't about never experiencing negative emotions, it's about how we respond to them. When we practice vulnerability, we learn to navigate difficult emotions with compassion and understanding, which builds our capacity to cope with future challenges. This is why many therapists and counselors encourage clients to embrace their vulnerabilities as part of the healing process. Additionally, vulnerability can reduce feelings of loneliness and isolation. When we hide our true selves, we often feel disconnected from others, as if we're living behind a mask. By being vulnerable, we open up opportunities for genuine connection, which is a vital component of emotional well-being. Feeling understood and supported by others can significantly improve our overall mental health.
That's fascinating, Solomon. It's clear that vulnerability isn't just about relationships, but is also deeply tied to our internal world and how we handle life's ups and downs. I'm curious, how can vulnerability influence our creativity and problem-solving abilities?
Great question, Camo. Vulnerability plays a significant role in creativity and innovation. When we embrace vulnerability, we're more willing to take risks, think outside the box, and explore new ideas. Creativity often requires us to step into the unknown, to experiment with concepts that might fail, and to express parts of ourselves that we might usually keep hidden. This can be a vulnerable process because it involves putting our unfiltered ideas and work out into the world where they might be criticized or rejected. However, it's precisely this willingness to be vulnerable that leads to breakthroughs. When we stop worrying about perfection and instead focus on the process of creation, we allow ourselves to explore more freely. This mindset not only enhances creativity, but also leads to more effective problem solving. Being vulnerable enough to admit when we don't have all the answers or when we've made a mistake opens the door to collaboration and innovation. Others can step in with fresh perspectives, and together we can find solutions that we might not have discovered on our own. In fact, many of history's greatest innovators, from artists to scientists, have embraced vulnerability as part of their creative process. By being open to failure and willing to share their authentic selves, they were able to push the boundaries of what was possible. It's a powerful reminder that vulnerability and creativity are deeply intertwined.
That's an inspiring perspective, Solomon. It seems like vulnerability is a key ingredient in so many areas of life: relationships, mental health, creativity, and beyond. Before we wrap up, could you share some real-life examples or stories of individuals or leaders who have successfully embraced vulnerability and seen positive results?
Absolutely, Camo. One of the most well-known examples is Brené Brown herself. Brené Brown is a research professor who became famous for her work on vulnerability, courage, and shame. In her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, she shares her own story of struggling with vulnerability and how embracing it transformed her life and career. Her talk has resonated with millions of people around the world, highlighting the universal importance of vulnerability in living a wholehearted life. Another example is Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks. Schultz has spoken openly about how his experiences growing up in poverty shaped his leadership style. He frequently shared personal stories and was transparent about the challenges he faced in running the company. This vulnerability helped him build a strong, loyal team and fostered a corporate culture that values empathy and connection. On a more personal level, consider the story of a woman named Sarah, not her real name, who struggled with social anxiety for years. She decided to embrace vulnerability by joining a local support group where she could openly discuss her fears. Through this experience, Sarah not only found relief from her anxiety, but also made meaningful friendships and became an advocate for mental health awareness in her community. Her journey shows how vulnerability can lead to personal growth and positive change.
These stories are truly inspiring, Solomon. They show that vulnerability, far from being a weakness, can be a powerful force for good in our lives and in the world. As we close, can you share a final thought or piece of advice for our viewers who might be hesitant to embrace vulnerability?
Certainly, Camo. My final advice to viewers is this: start small, but start somewhere. Vulnerability doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It can begin with simple acts of honesty and openness. Whether it's expressing a feeling you've been holding back, admitting when you need help, or taking a creative risk, each step you take toward vulnerability is a step toward a more authentic and fulfilling life. Remember, vulnerability is not about being fearless. It's about showing up even when you feel fear. And in doing so, you'll discover strengths within yourself that you never knew existed.
That's wonderful advice, Solomon. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. Vulnerability is truly a strength, and I hope our viewers feel empowered to embrace it in their own lives.
It was my pleasure, Camo. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in to this episode of Camo's Mirror. Remember, vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but a courageous act of authenticity. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please subscribe, share this episode with others, and let us know your thoughts. Until next time, keep reflecting, stay authentic, and be kind to yourself.